2, 1. Welcome everyone. Happy Friday. Apologies for the background noise. I've got a bulldog snoring behind my desk. So I'll try and make my part of this brief so that way we can clear up the noise pollution and get right to our guest speaker today. So happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to another amazing chat with Power to Fly. I'm super excited to introduce you to today's speaker, but before we do that, I want to go over some real quick housekeeping items for y'all. Let's see. There we go. All right, so first and foremost, like all of our virtual events, today is all about you. So my name is Meg, and I'll be your host today, and my whole job here is to make sure that the time that you spend with Power to Fly is time well worth it. So you are more than encouraged to participate if you'd like. You can turn your cameras on. You can show up to share your smiling maskless face safely with all of us. Just know that if you do come off mute for any reason, you will show up on the live recording of today's session because we're recording it. We're also live streaming to our YouTube channel, and we'll be posting the recording on our YouTube as well as on our on our YouTube as well as on our website. So to that end, like I said, you're more than welcome to participate. You can add comments or whatever you'd like in chat with your fellow participants in the Zoom chat. You're also welcome to DM me directly if you'd like, but we just want to make sure that y'all feel welcome and like you can really get a participatory experience at today's event. Like I said, today's event is being recorded. So what's going to happen is everybody that registered for today's session, whether you come and spend 5 minutes with us, you stay for the full 60, or if you weren't able to make it today, but you wanted to be sure that you didn't miss this, hi, future viewers, everybody that registered is going to get an email in about 1 to 2 business days, so it'll probably be next week, with a link to rewatch the recording of today's event. So that's really helpful in that you don't have to take notes or worry if you missed something that someone said, because you can always go back and review it later. Now, if Brittany says something absolutely amazing and you cannot wait to share it with a coworker or a friend or a relative, you don't have to worry. So you can always head over to our YouTube channel. Within about 5 to 15 minutes of the end of today's event, the video should be live on our YouTube channel. We are at Power to Fly on YouTube. And I highly recommend that you subscribe to that channel if you attend, even a handful of our chat and learns. Because it's a great way to make sure that you know when these chat and learns are happening, as well as making sure that you don't miss a recording if you're not able to, get registered prior to the event. So it's a really nice way to stay up to date on these great resources and events that we have without cluttering up your inbox. The other thing that I do want to is we highly encourage you to take photos or video as we go and share the love on social. We want to make sure that everybody that's in your network has a resource, pardon me, and can take advantage of it. So, so sorry guys. Please feel free to connect with us on social. We are at Power to Fly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And yeah, I think that will do everything for getting us started. I would love to introduce you. I'm so sorry, guys. I've got a frog in my throat. I'd love to introduce you to our amazing speaker from your UShip, Brittany Durden. Brittany is an agility manager with UShip, and she's based out of Austin, Texas. With almost a decade of experience working at various small to medium-sized tech companies, she has spent most of her career working closely with Agile teams to help optimize their processes and how they work together. Pardon me, I'm so sorry, everybody. So that they can deliver great products and achieve their goals. Outside of agility and coaching, Brittany is passionate about fitness, music, and her 2 dogs. So welcome, Brittany. We're super excited to have you here today and can't wait to get into UShip. I'm so sorry, I have like a frog caught in my throat, y'all. Before we jump into the questions today, I just want to highlight that UShip is a partner with Power to Fly, and they're currently hiring. So I'm going to share a link to you in the chat here in just a moment. And it's where you can check out UShip's company page. It'll look very similar to what I'm showing you right now, except at the top right-hand side of the screen, there'll be a big pink follow button. Now, what I recommend you do if you are, if you are interested in learning more about UShip, or if something, that Brittany talks about today makes you more interested in them as a company, you can head to this page. You can check out company info to get more information on, what they're like, what they're looking for, how they're expanding. You can also check out events that'll show you upcoming events that they're going to participate in, like our virtual job fair, our mini summits, or these chat and learn programs. And it'll also show you past events that we have hosted with UShip team members. You can watch those as well. The other thing that's great about this page is this is where you can check out all of the open roles that UShip has posted with Power to Fly. Now, currently, let's see, currently UShip has a number of jobs posted with us, but it's always a really great place to take a look. You can also, pushing that follow button, like I mentioned at the top of this page, is going to put you on their follow network. And basically what that does is it works like your friend at the company. So it tells UShip that you are very interested in working with them, even if you don't apply for anything. And it also keeps you up to date on if and when UShip posts new roles. So it's a really great way to stay updated without feeling like you have to keep visiting the same web pages over and over. The other thing that is a really great idea to do about this is, that follow network for UShip. I highly recommend you click that follow button, especially if you're interested in UShip, but there's nothing that you would love to apply for right now. Again, it's a great way to make sure that you are on UShip's radar, as well as making sure that you don't miss any upcoming opportunities from them. So for today's conversation, we're going to be kind of covering these three principal themes. Now, what we did is we partially this whole theme is designed based on what Brittany is here to talk to you all about today. But the other factor that goes into it is we look at the questions that y'all pre-submitted. So leading up to today's event, people were able to ask questions to kind of drive today's conversation and learn what they want, what they're interested in learning about. But the other thing we want to highlight is that if you have questions, if you have further interest from today's session, just understand that this is probably what we're going to try and cover. But Brittany is also willing to make herself available in case you have questions that kind of delve a little bit deeper into some of the things we're going to talk about today. So like I said, some of the principal themes for today's conversation, we're going to cover some skills that you can utilize to become more self-sufficient in removing obstacles, tools for how to set clear expectations for your teams, which is always a more difficult thing than you'd think, as well as a deeper understanding on why trust is so important in creating a working environment. So to get us started, Brittany, let's talk about an agile mindset. I know you had wanted to set, kind of a base level of understanding for how we were going to proceed. So why don't you take it away?
Awesome. Thanks, Meg. Props powering through that frog in your throat. That's always the worst on Zoom. Yeah, so I'm super excited to be here. Thank you all for the pre-submitted questions. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to chat with you all today. So what I wanted to do at the top of this convo before we dive into the Q&A is sort of set a foundation for what an agile mindset is. And an important piece of this is my summary. This is pulling from my own experiences, what's worked well, what hasn't worked well. So just keep that in mind as we're talking through all of this. It's just through my lens. And so the summary that I wanted to start with is Agile is a focus on people and teamwork. As the Agile Manifesto says, people over process. That doesn't mean that process isn't important. It just means that people are at the root of highly performing teams and success. The second piece is embracing that Agile is not one size fits all. Very, very important piece. And why that's so important is that Agile is not a box to fit into. It's not an assembly line to just hop on and it's going to be a silver bullet to solve all your problems. But what it is it's a mindset, it's a methodology, it's something that you can hold on to and look to help guide you through your own situations, your own team conflict, whatever it may be. And that's honestly a pro that you can kind of mold it into what you need it to be and that you have these values to look to and hold on to. So remember that also as we're talking through everything. And then the last piece is learning, growth, and adapting to change. I think a lot of people kind of immediately go to that last piece when you hear the word agile is adapting to change. And it totally is, but there's so much more to that. It's about learning and growth and really understanding why you're adapting to change and why you're making certain changes. So wanted to be sure to call that out. So as we're going through the conversation, I'll definitely reference these 3 circles quite a bit. And yeah, that's kind of it. So let's dive in.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much for kind of dialing that out for people. It can be a really great way to get into a talk like this. All right, so to start us off here, what are some of the most common challenges experienced by teams that are following an agile framework?
Yeah, thanks for the question, whoever submitted it. So each team is different and unique, as we all know, and so problems aren't one size fits all. And that said, each team will most likely go through similar challenges as they are becoming a team. And what that means is, how they establish their norms and go through the phases of a team, forming, storming, norming, and ultimately performing. There will inevitably be growing pains throughout that process. And so when teams come together, fully embracing that you are just coming together and things are going to be a little bit clunky, but over time you'll start to work through that. Is how I've seen teams kind of kick things off on the right foot. But yeah, I would say that's the summary of a common thing that all teams will go through. Even though it's not super specific, all teams will have to go through that process of figuring out who they are, how they're going to operate together, and what matters to them, and how they accomplish problems.
Are there any of those facets that are most important to tackle first, or are they all sort of equal importance and interconnected enough that to determine one, you really do have to determine the rest?
I mean, they definitely build on each other, for sure. There's some other questions that were pre-submitted where we'll get into the details of that, especially the forming phase. I mean, you're really setting the foundation. That's your first foot forward on what the team is going to be focused on, how y'all are going to operate together, how you're going to resolve conflict. And so they do build on each other, and they all are intermingled and very important. But yeah, really acknowledging that you're coming together, you're forming. Things aren't going to just be super smooth right off the bat, and that's okay. That's what it's all about. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, so what are some other factors that are important when you're trying to create these happy teams?
Yeah, love this question too. Thinking about the Scrum values, if you're a Scrum team, you come together to solve certain problems as a unit. You're all dependent upon each other, but what makes that team happy? Those Scrum values that are so important in making a happy team are courage, commitment, focus, respect, and openness. And respect and openness are really at the root of a happy team. Just being able to respect each other, lean on each other, and be open with each other. We'll also talk a lot about that. Openness, psychological safety, trust. Those things are so important in making a happy team. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. Just to play a little devil's advocate, is it possible to go too far with like the transparency and trust factor? Or is this really something that is just not really part of the traditional business mindset? And so we need to kind of pour it on to get people to really understand how much it benefits the team.
Yeah. I don't know if it's possible to go too far. I think if intentions are good and pure and expectations are clear, then it's easier to find that balance of what the right level of trust and transparency is. I mean, trust is about reliability and saying what you're going to do and proving that you can, keep to your word. And as a team, that's really what's at the root of a high performing team. And so, yeah, I'm not too sure if there's a too far point, as long as you are acknowledging that everything is a balance, and talking through it is part of it too.
Awesome. Okay. So can you talk to us a little bit about a time when you've had to overcome an obstacle in building trust? Because it feels like something that's much, much easier said than done.
For sure.
So let's start with that.
Yeah, definitely easier said than done. One situation that comes to my mind is I had a team member where we were just two ships passing in the night, not able to kind of align on what we were each trying to get across. Our intentions were totally misunderstood by each other. And it was just back and forth that we weren't really able to make progress. And it was creating this tension and this lack of trust, a lack of, I don't know, just not being able to work well together. And so how I worked through that and how we worked through that was starting with actively listening, like really, really trying to listen to that other person and understand where they're coming from and empathizing with them. And not just trying to get my point across, because I found myself slipping into that place of, man, I'm so tired of dealing with this person. I just really want to get my point across. I don't understand why they don't understand what I'm trying to do. And so when I took a step back and put myself in their shoes, I was like, let me just hear them out. Let me hear where they're coming from. And so we started there, and it definitely didn't happen overnight, but actively listening and then following through on what we both said that we were going to do coming out of those conversations, meetings, situations, whatever it was. But that active listening piece was really where it began.
All right, so if we're working on building trust with our teams, and this might be a little too nitpicky, so tell me if you'd rather cover one angle than the other, but
Sure.
are there key differences in how you should start building that trust when it's an existing team versus when it's a new team, like a newly formed team?
Key differences. I mean, I guess the big difference that comes to my mind is acknowledging that a team has a past. So a team that's first coming together for the first time, they're starting from scratch, which in a lot of ways is good because they don't have any baggage. They don't have situations that they're already trying to navigate through. That also has its own, difficulties because you don't know each other. You don't know how each other works, so you have to figure everything out from the beginning. But when a team has been working together for quite some time, but you are having a moment where you're like, wow, we really need to reset on what trust means to us and how we want to move forward. I think just acknowledging that the team does have a past and talking through how people are holding on to that and what it means and how we want to move forward and creating this space for that kind of dialogue is important. And that also won't happen overnight, certainly. So creating that continued space for those kinds of dialogues, utilizing retrospectives, things like that. That would be my summary.
Thank you. So when you're just getting started to build that trust, how do you start that conversation? Is it organic, or do you try to make it more casual, or is it better to just start kind of on a formal level, saying like, hey, we need better trust in this team? Like, what is for your, in your experience, what's the better approach?
Everyone's favorite answer. It definitely depends on the situation. I think if it's a one-on-one scenario where you feel pretty comfortable, maybe trust has been broken, but you feel like you can be pretty candid with them, just calling it out and saying that, hey, let's do a reset. Like, this is what I'm struggling with. What are you struggling with? I think we need to kind of rebuild what trust means to us. At the team level, it can be a little bit more complex because there's team dynamics that are coming into play. Psychological safety is harder to establish as a group, especially when there's history involved. And so we'll talk a little bit about this in a bit, I think, with another question, but doing things like temperature checks can be good. Anonymous temperature checks. So scrum masters are a good person on a team to help facilitate those. Basically what that is just a survey that you send to each person and get their gauge on how they're feeling. Like, do they feel safe? Do they feel like they can trust each other? And then once you get those results back, you have a clear indicator on if there is something to work on solving. And so you can launch off of that into crafting out what, next steps should and could be. So very wide answer that I just gave you, but hopefully that's helpful for folks.
No, absolutely. And you're right. There's a lot of these situations where it depends, but then I feel like the it depends is just as important as what comes after it, because it gives you a little bit more direction. I come from a legal background, so it depends is the answer to everything. But it's always what comes after it, right? It depends. If you want to go this way, maybe try this. If you want to go that way, maybe try that. Especially since, like you said, each situation is slightly different. Each company, each team, each project, it's always a little bit of a change.
Totally.
All right, so let's talk about some of the obstacles that come up for these Agile teams. Can you share some of your strategies for removing those obstacles?
Yeah. So just like teams are all different, just like all situations are all different, obstacles are certainly different. And obstacles can be in the form of, a relationship that you're not sure how to work through, building up trust and figuring out how to work with that person, or it can be, something technical where you're like, man, I don't have access to this platform. I have no idea how to gain access to this platform to solve my need, whatever it may be. Um, but the real key here is in solving any obstacle, in my opinion, is communication. And while that's not a light bulb moment, I'm sure for everybody on this call, how you utilize communication and lean on it is really where you can make great strides in removing obstacles that maybe you didn't think you had the power to remove them before. And what I mean by that is, have conversations with people that maybe you didn't think you could have conversations with before. Try and open a door that wasn't open previously to talk through something. I think it's easy for folks to assume that they can't talk to a certain person for whatever reasons. Maybe your org isn't very flat and you feel like you can't go have a conversation with that person, but start somewhere, start with someone and talk through it. Be open about what challenge you're up against, and without that trust and psychological safety, it's harder to do that. And so that's, when you summarize at the beginning, one of the themes that we're focused on today, that's why it's so important is you can't have great communication without that trust and psychological safety. So it's not a step-by-step process, but it definitely builds on each other. I feel like I kind of went off the rails with that answer.
No, totally. And you're right. There's a lot of these questions that a lot of the nuances in them are discussed in more depth in some of these other questions, because y'all submitted some really great questions. So like you said, so communication is obviously really key to that removal of obstacles. Are there certain methods of communication that work better, or is it really just opening up communication no matter what form it takes?
Yeah, great question. I don't know if there are certain methods that really come to mind, but I don't know if folks on the call have read Radical Candor, but I highly recommend that book by Kim Scott. And basically, it's really focused on just being direct, but not being a jerk about it, but just being direct. Don't beat around the bush, because that just isn't good for either party. If you're not being direct and not able to actually talk about what's happening, then you're just creating more friction, more space in between actually solving the issue or working through whatever it may be. So yeah, I'm not sure if there's a particular method, but definitely being direct would be my recommendation there. And read Radical Candor, because that was my butchered summary of the book.
Awesome. Thank you for that recommendation. All right. So when you're dealing with a remote team, there's a lot. I wouldn't say that there are more challenges. Personally, I would say they were just different challenges. But
Yeah.
what is one of the best ways that you've used to set expectations with a remote team?
Yeah, totally agree with your statement about it being different challenges. Pros and cons for sure, but whole new world for me and my team at UShip, navigating, working with remote teams, and it's been awesome having them to lean on, and also just awesome how UShip has come together in the remote world. But that aside, how to set expectations is an ongoing process, but one tool that we like to utilize, especially at UShip on our Scrum teams, is having team charters, creating working agreements as a team when we come together, or even when a team's been together for a long time, kind of referencing the earlier question about, how different is it when you have a team that's new versus pre-existing. Either way, a team charter creation meeting or team charter kind of update meeting is a great way to set those expectations and realign on expectations, especially in the remote world. And so part of those team charters, you not only can include norms for how the team will operate, the mission and vision of the team, why they even are a team in the first place. But things like core hours, like when are we available to communicate with each other? Do we prefer email? Do we prefer, hey, Natalia, seen you forever. Do we prefer Slack? How do we want to notify each other of whatever it may be? Just having it documented and being able to reference it, and then holding each other accountable to that is a great way to set expectations. So definitely try that out. If anybody wants to see some examples of team charters or talk through how to facilitate that conversation, feel free to hit me up afterwards on LinkedIn. Happy to talk through that.
I'll be sharing Brittany's contact info for LinkedIn here in just a moment. Now, you talked a little bit about kind of building that team from scratch when everyone is working from home. Are there any more, are there any different considerations that you need to make when it is a brand new team entirely remote?
You know, I'm sure there are things that I just think coming together and setting those expectations in general is kind of the same, just having that same kind of conversation. Of course, when there are new people coming into the company, there's going to be onboarding elements or other pieces of the culture and norms outside of just the team that you're having to think about. So that's important to have that awareness, but nothing super comes to mind in regards to like specific differences beyond just acknowledging that there's probably a bigger expectation setting that's happening outside of that, beyond just at the team level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I don't know, do you have any experience dealing with outsourced teams, like, teams that are part of a different organization altogether, or is your experience more limited to like teams that are part of all one org?
I have experience with both. Most of my experience is all one org. So although I do have some experience working with offshore teams and teams outside of USHIP, it's not nearly as much compared to internal teams.
Awesome. All right. So how do you work to be agile when you're in a fast multitasking environment? Are there any tools or tips that you have for this? Because personally, it would seem really difficult to kind of make things streamlined when you're constantly being pulled in a ton of different directions.
Yeah, definitely. Love this question. Definitely a lot of aspects to it too. But one tip that is pretty tangible that comes to mind, and probably a good place to start, is just visualizing your work. So whether that's on a Kanban board with your team, whatever form that ends up taking, that can really help you as an individual on a team kind of work through all of the things that you're working on and what that flow, there are my dogs that I told you about earlier, what that flow looks like. And if all of the team members are visualizing your work, you can start to sort of align on priorities and identify where somebody maybe shouldn't be working on something, and that we can sort of put that on the back burner for now, and hopefully limit the multitasking over time and be able to focus in on a couple key initiatives or key tickets, whatever it may be. So yeah, visualizing your work is a great place to start to help with that really fast-paced environment.
Excellent. I think that's a great idea. All right. So does Agile really make sense for all parts of an engineering business, or is it really something that is best utilized in certain instances?
Lawyer answer. It depends. One second, let me yell at my dog.
While Brittany is tending to her dog for just a second, I'm going to go in here and share her contact information in the chat. She has greatly been very nicely agreed to make herself available in case any of y'all have follow-up questions. So I will share that in the chat right now. And then Brittany, feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Yes. The question was, does Agile really make sense for all parts of an engineering business, right? That was where we were at. Okay, perfect. Yeah, it depends. It depends what kind of problems you're trying to solve or what areas you're trying to optimize. As we talked about at the beginning of this whole conversation, Agile isn't one size fits all by design, but there are definitely pieces that you can pull out from the principles and values and utilize them for your specific teams. And so maybe you're starting small and you're not doing a full transformation. That would be my recommendation, honestly. But if you find that your teams aren't talking enough and they don't really know how to provide feedback to each other, but it feels like a relatively safe place, safe space, try retros out and just give that a go for a few weeks and see if that starts to help the teams. So the summary of that is depends, and try out small pieces of it and just see what works, and nothing's permanent. So if it doesn't work, try something else. And that's honestly why I love my job so much, is that we can experiment, see what works, what doesn't work, and launch off of that and continue to grow as individuals and teams.
Okay. So this next question was obviously, like all of ours, submitted by an attendee prior to today's session, but this one is a little bit more personal. This person says, I've worked for small companies that don't use Agile methodologies. How can I still bring structure without incorporating full Agile methodologies in a company that doesn't really welcome it?
Yeah, very similar answer as above, actually. So think about what problems you're trying to solve and what areas you're trying to optimize, and focus on that first. No need to overanalyze the problems you're trying to solve, but just think about what a small thing you could try to implement to help with that particular problem or area, and go from there, launch off of that. So I hope that's helpful. I think just starting small is really the takeaway from that.
Okay. When you're talking about visualizing your work, are there any tools that you suggest for that, or any frameworks that are especially helpful, or is it really just down to whatever the person's already familiar with?
There's so many out there in the world. I think an easy one that a lot of people, thinking of tools, actual tools and resources, Trello is an easy tool for people to adapt that maybe aren't super familiar with creating Kanban boards. But Kanban boards are a great way to just start small with visualizing your work, because you're not quite there of committing to sprints and doing full on sprint planning, whatever it may be. So start with a Kanban board, just to do, in progress, done as your columns, and move things over as you're progressing through your tasks. And then see what other steps may make sense to add into that. Also happy to go down a rabbit hole on Kanban and Scrum outside of this chat if folks are interested.
Excellent. Thank you for that. All right. So another person had written in saying that their calendar is really at the beck and call of their clients. Is there a way to be agile when you're not really controlling your calendar?
Man, just talking to my team about calendar craziness this morning, so this is very top of mind. I guess the first piece is I would want to ask this person what Agile means to them, thinking about one of those foundational elements of responding to change. I imagine that's really where the root of this question is coming from. Of, if I'm a slave to my calendar, how am I going to respond to change when I don't have any wiggle room? And Agile is so much more than just responding to change. While that is a core element, it's, as we talked about, people over process. It's about buy-in. It's about teamwork. It's about collaboration. And so maybe there's an opportunity to kind of collaborate with your clients and kind of reset expectations on when you're available and when you're not, and help them understand why that will ultimately benefit them if you have that time to zoom out and adapt to change and learn and grow. And by no means am I trying to say that you should be able to reset your whole calendar, because my calendar is crazy too. So I totally understand. But yeah, again, starting small. Start with maybe just one block of time on Fridays, whatever it may be. That's your time to sort of zoom out and think about how things have gone through the week and what kind of changes you want to implement in the next week.
I love that. It's kind of like an office hours approach, right? Like certain times you're not available and certain times you are, but yeah, like opening up those windows of when you can be booked for things.
Yeah, and helping clients understand why, which I know this is way easier said than done, but getting their buy-in so they respect it. Because if they don't totally understand why you're doing that, then chances are it's just gonna keep getting booked over.
Yeah, I have plenty of experience with that. All right. So this person had asked, what recommendation do you have for those of us who go into analysis paralysis mode or have a tendency to run through assignments before taking action?
I feel for this. I do the same thing, just really easy to overthink and kind of take the thoughtfulness to the next level before taking action. And my advice here, and it's way easier said than done, just like a couple other things we talked about, but don't let perfect get in the way of good. But it's so true. Just remembering that as you're working through particular problems, tasks, who knows what it is. Don't let perfect get in the way of good, and challenge yourself to be a little bit uncomfortable when you're shipping something out. Maybe it's not exactly, a product that you're shipping out with a software dev team, but maybe it's you're putting a proposal together to review with your manager, and you're slightly uncomfortable about where it is, but you feel confident enough in it and you want to get some early feedback. Set that expectation with your manager that maybe it's not fully baked, but you want that early feedback, and just challenge yourself to do it a little bit earlier than you would initially. And approaching it with an MVP kind of mindset too, that this is just enough to get me to that first goal, that first piece of what I'm trying to accomplish. And then I'll tackle the next pieces after that. So thinking about it in an iterative way as well has helped me personally work through kind of analysis paralysis.
I love that idea that, if we do that at Power to Fly a ton, where like you don't let perfection be the enemy of good. So instead of feeling like, because I'm on the same page as you, where like I get that paralysis because I'm like, I can see how much better this could be with like some more time or with a different approach or whatever. And for me, you're right. It's been very helpful to think of it as the first iteration. So like, okay, we're going to take this first pass at it. We'll see how it works. We'll see what everybody else thinks about it. See if I get, a brilliant idea like 2 minutes after I've shown everybody else. And then it kind of makes me feel less of that pressure of like, well, if it's not perfect, then I shouldn't have wasted all that time, or like, what's the point,
Yeah, totally. Totally.
All right. So how do you make trade-offs when the executive team completely overrules agile models for some key clients? This can obviously disturb the team structure as well as your agile practices, but not everybody has the authority to say, no, we're not doing that. So how do you make those trade-offs that are going to help your team and help the product?
Yeah, this is a loaded question and a very common question. I'm going to focus on kind of one slice of it, which is the team structure and the agile practices getting disturbed and how to sort of navigate that situation. So, an agile coach or a scrum master is a great person to lean on in these scenarios where leadership, folks outside the team, whoever it may be, is not respecting the agile principles that you put into place and the team structure that you put into place. And so they can kind of help communicate that value with the team outwards to protect the team from negative influences or distractions. I realize that not every team can have a scrum master or an agile coach to help them through that. That said, the team can still take ownership of their own destiny. And what I mean by that is helping communicate outwards why it's important for them to adhere to their agile processes that they put in place or the team structure that they put in place, and how to kind of communicate that value. At least in my experience that I've seen work well is find some metrics that you can lean on and show to folks. And it's more than just velocity, it's also team health, it's team happiness scores, and showing, look how great this team is performing because we are holding on to these things that we set in place, and utilizing metrics and some kind of summary and visualization to help communicate that out. Because without that visualization, without those metrics in some scenarios to look at, it's harder to have that conversation on why is this so valuable? Why can't I just hand this particular problem statement to this person on this team? They can just go off and do it, when that team is trying to accomplish their own sprint goal as a unit, and that completely disrupts what they have in place. So that's my summary for that one. Hopefully that one's helpful.
Yeah, I think so. I do actually want to go a little bit more in depth on that if we could. Can you
Sure.
talk a little bit more about the metrics thing? Because I feel like for certain people, obviously it's going to be an it depends, but are there certain areas that, are kind of fail-safe metrics that you can measure, or are, are there specific ways you can, approach this in your various industries?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely depends. I think when we're talking about software dev teams, we have a set list of metrics that we like to utilize, and I think it's pretty applicable to other teams as well. So team health I referenced, that's definitely a whole other conversation, which I love talking about the team health scores that we put together. So feel free to hit me up on that. But measuring that and being able to utilize that as a way of tracking how the team's doing, predictable velocity, so how much variance is it, and how much the team is actually able to tackle in a particular sprint or whatever it may be. And then, defects created, closure rates, fires that come in, tracking that kind of work. That's really important, especially for teams who are struggling with distractions. Start visualizing that, start showing the impact that that's having on the team and how much focus is going to those kinds of things. And I've seen great success in making change once you start to visualize those kinds of distractions.
I love that. Okay, so let's switch gears here a little bit. We're still going to obviously focus on agility, but obviously you're not an HR professional, but this person is, and they want to know how to go about making blue collar workers who are used to these manual processes be more efficient through agile methodologies. So how would you approach this question?
Yeah, going back to something we talked about earlier with active listening and meeting people where they're at, starting there, having a conversation with them on what's working well, what's not working well, tell me about your experience, and launching off of that into a moment of trying to show the value prop of a different process that could make things more efficient and making them a part of that process. So instead of just saying, hey, here's a new process that you should go follow, zoom way back out, rewind, and start with just a conversation with them, understand what their day-to-day is like and what problems they're experiencing, start with that buy-in, and then work together on what a path forward is. Because without that buy-in, success probably isn't as likely as it is once you have that buy-in and you work together on changing things up. Because folks who have been doing things for a long time and maybe they think it's working totally fine, but once you have a conversation analyzing it, maybe it's not, then you can start to open their eyes and start to get that buy-in. And again, nothing is permanent. So Agile is about learning and growth and adapting to change. So if you try something, it doesn't work, then try something else and get that feedback loop to understand why it may be working or why it may not be working, and then pivot off of that. So yeah, that's where I would start.
Okay. Now, when we're talking about, I find a lot of similarity between this question and the last one, right? About how to make those key trade-offs when you're dealing with somebody who's kind of controlling the situation, whether it's through power or through the fact that like they're the ones that are going to be actually implementing the plans that you're kind of laying out. So obviously the metrics that you're going to point out is going to very much depend on the audience, right? Because you want to kind of skew that towards whoever you're trying to convince. You had talked a little bit about team health, and I would kind of like to dig in on this a little bit, because do you think that team health is more like as a metric or as something to like explain to people? Do you think that carries more weight when you're dealing with an executive team or when you're dealing with, like a team that you're trying to implement this for from the top down?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, and thanks for calling that out, because I didn't say that yet, but yeah, audience is something that should be at the forefront of the decisions and helping you navigate through the it depends scenario. Thinking through who you're talking to and who you're trying to get buy-in from or who you're trying to convince on something. And so, well, shoot, now I've confused myself with your question. Can you re-summarize it in part of your question?
Yeah, so when we're talking about the team health, I found that really interesting and I wanted to learn a little bit more about it. But obviously, like, do you think that team health as a metric carries more weight for an exec or more weight for the people you're trying to convince this will be good for them?
The team, definitely the team. That's the area that I've seen it most impactful, especially in the agility team at USHIP is utilizing that metric for the team itself. It's an opportunity for them to see how their teammates are feeling about something. Although it is an anonymous result, you can see the scale of where people are falling. If they're not clear on mission and vision is one question that we like to ask. Like, do you feel clear on the mission and vision of our team? And if there's one person that's happy and then there's 10 people that are not happy, that's an eye-opening experience for the team to have a conversation around what's going on here. Why is there a significant disconnect with somebody and then the rest of the team is on the same page? So definitely team health at the team level. And then an important piece of that is, as a team, figuring out what you want to bubble up outwards to leadership. What do we want to pull from these metrics, these takeaways, and share with leadership to help whatever it is? If they need a clear mission and vision from the top, then you take that metric out and say, hey, we just realized 90% of our team doesn't know what the heck we're doing. Can you help us? And yeah.
Okay. So just for my own curiosity, because I've never seen it broken down like this, how do you measure team health with metrics? Is it like a lot of little pieces, or because I feel like it could be either one of those things that like makes a ton of sense, or it could feel kind of wishy-washy, right? To like somebody that might be really skeptical of it as a metric.
Yeah, we created our way of measuring team health off of the Spotify model, which some folks on here may be pretty familiar with. But basically, it's a list of, I think, 10 questions, and it's focused on different elements that go into the team. So what influences a team, whether it's mission and vision, how we work together, the processes that we follow, do we get support from folks outside of the team? I'm forgetting all the other ones, but different elements, and then each person can respond to each section, and then you see how you fall and how you're trending. So it's less about the number that we land on, and it's more about the trend, and that trend is what drives conversation and ultimately drives those learning and growth moments and retrospectives or whatever meeting that those conversations are taking place in. So hopefully that adds a little bit more color and makes it more clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this next person had asked, when hiring a new team or individual, what are the top 3 items that you recommend looking for to establish a strong and positive foundation? Obviously, when you go to, especially if you're looking for a unicorn or you're looking for an entire herd of unicorns, right? So how do you look, where do you start? What are the top 3 things that you want to look for?
Mm-hmm. I think to set that strong and positive foundation, the 3 things really, it starts with expectation management from the get-go. Why are you hiring somebody or a team? Why are you building a team? Why are you bringing somebody new on? And that's not only expectation management with yourself, but the team that you're bringing them into and the person, to make sure that you understand intent, direction. What is my purpose? Why am I coming in here? What are expectations for me? What are expectations for the team? So starting with that expectation management as part of that positive foundation is the number one, in my opinion. And then talking about clear mission and vision again, sort of dovetailing off that first piece, but what is the mission and vision? Like, why am I here? What should I be focused on? What am I working towards? And that ultimately leads to motivated individuals and teams if they understand what they're trying to accomplish. And then the last piece I would say is clarity on who to lean on and who to go to for certain things. I know we talk a lot about self-sufficiency, and a part of that is communication, but if you don't know who to go to talk to or feel like you have clarity on who you can lean on or who your go-to is, then that can really that can be difficult for folks to start off that way. So just making sure that it's really clear at the get-go who folks can lean on, and those would be the 3 things I think for starting that positive foundation of a team or new person.
Excellent. Yeah, I think you're right. It's I remember when I was doing onboarding for Power to Fly, because this was my first ever remote role. And even prior to the pandemic, we were entirely remote and entirely distributed. So the idea of trying to communicate a company culture or communicate like a work ethos of like, here's how we problem solve, and here's how we, tackle last minute emergencies, and here's how we do this. Yeah, it was all about setting those expectations. If you have a situation where the expectations change because they just have to, do you find it pretty easy to communicate that out to like the rest of the team, or are there times where it really kind of necessitates a whole overhaul of what's happening?
Yeah, I guess it depends on how meaty of a overhaul it is, or how meaty of a, if it's an overhaul, it's probably meaty, how meaty of a change it is. But it takes, what is it, 7 times for somebody to understand and grok and remember what someone said. So thinking about that, it probably, is worth repeating this information and maybe thinking about things through that lens to ensure that folks are going to understand the changes and what that impact has on them, versus just a quick Slack message saying, this is updated, which sometimes that makes sense. But if it's something that's more significant, then thinking through other communication paths that you should take to make sure that it lands with folks. I know I appreciate at UShip, we have so many communication paths with Slack and email and multiple emails, and it's, repetitive, but it's necessary, especially in the remote world. I think over communication has been a strength that we've built up, kind of going off the rails now, but I just want to call that out, that
No, not at all. That's great.
over communication has been something that we've really had to lean on in the remote world, being a company that worked from one office pretty much, and then going to our homes and being in 2D world is very different in how you think about how to set things up with a positive foundation and make sure you have that clear expectation setting. So yeah.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And so that's one of the things that we tackle a lot, especially since pre-pandemic. A lot of Powerfly's whole idea was trying to show people the ways they could do, could have a remote workforce or could have a hybrid workforce. And you're right, it's that repetition and the kind of touch points that happen organically in an office don't happen when you're not in the office, but they're not something that happens out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like people might, talk about this kind of thing on their way to like the canteen to get a cup of coffee or something, but they're still making the choice to talk about it. So it's about, for us at least, it was a lot about like kind of redirecting that into these like smaller meetings.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I know that it can, a lot of Agile is based on the idea that you start with this overarching, large team plan, and then you start getting more and more granular about how that's going to, be achieved. What do you do when you've got people that are part of these meetings, especially like sprint planning, and they kind of feel really like unengaged about the whole thing, especially when it comes to aspects of, maybe the whole global plan that don't really have anything to do with them?
Yeah. I would say for that particular situation, I would encourage that team to sort of do a zoom out moment on what it means to them to be a team. And maybe that takes form in a charter discussion. Maybe it doesn't have to be that formal, but some moment to become aware that we're a team working towards goals together, and zooming in on those sprint goals and really utilizing those sprint goals, which everybody should have a vested interest in on the team. And so although you may not be the exact person that's carrying that ticket over the line or whatever, you should still care about the success of that particular ticket getting completed and getting done, and being a resource for that team, even if it's just some encouragement for that person. Maybe you would miss out on a moment to hear your teammate communicating that ticket is complex and a struggle for them. And so maybe you're not the one writing the code on that particular piece, but that is a complexity for that person. So you're going to say, hey, let's go get lunch together and just take a moment to decompress. And that's what it's about. I mean, that's why we have sprinkles, so we can work on them as one. And then I have a very tactical answer, which I would recommend doing the first piece first. And then tactically, if you want to try kind of round robin facilitation of sprint planning, so that it sort of forces the agenda of everybody has a part to play in this conversation, even if you don't know the ins and outs of every single ticket. So I've seen that work well too. And then people sort of get in their mind like, oh, I have to know what's going on with all these tickets, even though I don't own them. So I'm going to pay attention a little bit more because I'm leading the meeting. That's worked for us in the past too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. So before, I know we only have about 5 minutes left in today's session because these always go really quickly. Before we let you go for the day, I want to talk a little bit about UShip. So you, obviously the list that you're looking at, or the slide you're looking at here in front of you is based on some conversations that we had with Brittany prior to today's session. Brittany, you described the company culture as collaborative. Can you elaborate on that a little bit and maybe give us some examples of how that collaboration has been part of your experience with UShip?
Yeah, definitely. I love this piece of the UShip culture so much. And what this looks like at UShip is folks working together to solve problems every single day and knowing that they can lean on their teammates and folks that even aren't on their direct team to help them work towards a particular goal or through a particular initiative. And so being able to just know that I can ping anyone in the company, it's pretty crazy, and know that they will be there to sort of help me through whatever it is. We really prioritize working together to accomplish our goals. And again, going back to the remote conversation, it's been tough for us to sort of navigate what it means for us to be collaborative in the remote world. And we lean heavily on Slack and Zoom calls and whatever else. But yeah, I hope that provides enough color on what it looks like at UShip. But really want to drive home, this is one of my favorite pieces of UShip, and also it's so important too to having a successful sort of agile implementation and mindset throughout the org. Is this is at our root. This is how we work together. This is how we work through problems.
Awesome. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it's definitely one of those things that like it doesn't. How do we describe it? I heard somebody put it like this by saying that like, yeah, you could pass by a field of lovely wildflowers, and that's great. But if what you're looking to create is like a really super manicured garden, those don't just happen. So putting in that back, like the back end work of building up the framework for how you want this whole thing to go, and like you said, telling people like here's what we do when things go wrong, or here's who you go to if you don't know what to do next. Making those extra steps, it seems like a lot, or some people can feel like it seems like overkill. But if you know what you're trying to achieve, having that framework makes it, so much more likely and less of a headache to get there.
Definitely.
All right. So you talked about how your favorite part of working at UShip is the people. Is there anything specifically about it, or is it mostly just how how everybody kind of leads into this collaborative feel?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. People just care. They care about each other and they care about what we're trying to do. And so it's really encouraging and motivating to know that every day when I go to work or come to my kitchen and log onto my computer to work with folks, that everybody has great intentions and we're working together and everybody cares. So that's why I love the people at UShip.
I can appreciate, I can hear it in your voice. So that's really great. All right, so I'm going to flip to our next slide here, and it's got some of the open roles that are currently open at UShip. Can you talk a little bit about what you would suggest for somebody who was interviewing with UShip?
Yeah, definitely being your true self. Authenticity is one of our core values as well, and so we really want you to bring that to the table from day one being the interview process. We want to know who you are and what you're going to add to our culture. We don't want you to fit into the box of our culture. We want to understand what you're going to be contributing to our culture. So be yourself. And yeah, should I dive into these open positions?
Yeah, go right ahead. We've only got about 1.5 to 2 minutes left, so take your time.
Cool. So yeah, we have several positions open. Highly encourage you all to go check these out on either Power to Fly. I think Meg put the link in the chat, or uship.com. So we have product designer, QA engineer, software developer, senior SQL database admin, senior systems admin, customer support specialist, and digital marketing copywriter. So positions in many departments, pretty exciting stuff.
Are there any that you're particularly excited to get filled, or some people that you would work closely with?
I'm stoked about the product designer role because our our her name's Kelly. She is doer of all the things right now at UShip, design related, user experience related, and so I'm so excited for her to build out her team. And whoever that product designer is going to be really lucky to work for her. So I'm pumped on that one.
Awesome. Thank you so much for giving us that kind of insider peek. I want to say a huge thank you to Brittany. It's not just, the time commitment for today. There's also a lot of time that goes in on the back end to prepare for these sessions. So I just want to say huge thank you to you for coming, spending time with us, sharing your expertise, as well as your professional opinions on a lot of these things. Because you're right, it depends, and the it depends answer is going to depend on who you're asking too. So thank you so much for coming and spending time with us today. I also want to extend a huge thank you to our amazing audience. Y'all submitted amazing questions. I'm honestly kind of shocked we were able to get to all of them because Brittany was like a true rock star with all of this. If there's any more details that you wanted to go into with her, I did share her contact information in the thread again, where you can connect with her on LinkedIn. As we close out today, I do just want to say, again, thank you to everybody who took time to spend with us today. And hopefully you'll join us for many more upcoming events. We have a lot of really great stuff on the schedule for next week, as well as because it's the kickoff for our May Summit. So May 3rd through the 6th, we're having our next mini summit. It's going to include a virtual job fair, as well as the key, the overarching theme of the summit is inclusion in finance. So whether you are part of the financial complex, or you are just a person who has money, or wants some more, like some of us, definitely feel free to take a part in that. We're hoping to both, kind of give a place where the progress of inclusion in the financial industry can continue in ways we can support that. But we're also trying to, use it as an opportunity to break down some of the barriers to the information about the business and about the industry. So please feel free to join us for that. If you take nothing else from today, I hope that you learned some interesting things from Brittany, and I hope that you all have a wonderful weekend, and I hope to see you all again soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Meg.